All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're decoding the work of a man who has spent his entire life analyzing the mechanics of human ambition, Robert Greene. Now, he's written some of the most influential and, let's be honest, controversial books of our time. So controversial, in fact, that some of them are famously banned in prisons. But today, we're going to extract the core DNA of his philosophy. We aren't just reading history here. We're taking his incredibly rich concepts and distilling them down into actionable strategies that you can apply immediately to your career, your relationships, and your own personal self-development. But before we get into the actual tactics, we really need to pause and completely debunk a massive, pervasive myth. You see, most of us are conditioned to think that power is inherently malicious, right? That wanting power somehow makes you a bad person. Well, Greene flips this entirely on its head. Power isn't good or evil. It's simply a reality of human interaction. It's a fundamental game of human dynamics that you absolutely must understand. Because look, if you refuse to learn the rules of this game just because you think it's unsavory, you don't actually escape the game. You just end up as a pawn being played by those who do understand it. To get you there, this explainer is going to follow a progressive curriculum. Here is our agenda. 1. The reality of human nature. 2. The rules of power. 3. Thinking like a strategist. 4. Discovering your life's task. And 5. The path to mastery. All right, moving to section 1, the reality of human nature, stripping away biases. So our first step on this path is grounding ourselves entirely in reality. The core difference between feeling powerless and actually gaining control comes down to this exact shift. On one hand, you have emotional reactivity. That's being driven by sudden feelings, personal biases, taking things way too personally, and reacting defensively. Honestly, this is where most people live. But the master's domain, that's strategic detachment. It means observing objectively, without judgment. Think about it. When someone attacks you at work, instead of getting angry, a strategically detached person steps back and asks, well, why did they do that? What's their underlying insecurity? You're shifting from being a stress participant in the drama to basically a scientist, objectively observing an experiment. And when you finally strip away those emotional biases, it's like a fog lifting. You start to clearly see the reality around you without feeling completely overwhelmed by it. Suddenly, you notice the hidden games people play in corporate and social environments. You start to pick up on concealed motives, like why your colleague suddenly wants to help you on that high-profile project, or why a boss clearly favors one employee over another. Once you're detached, you realize these aren't personal attacks against you. They are just inevitable social dynamics playing out. Seeing them clearly, that is your very first layer of armor. Now that we see reality a bit more clearly, let's move to section 2, the rules of power, tactics for navigation. Here we get into Greene's pragmatic rules of power. Now sure, these might seem a little defensive at first glance, but they are essential, strategic tools designed to protect you from being manipulated by others. First up, conceal your intentions. I mean, if people don't know what you're aiming for, they literally can't set up roadblocks in your way. Second, speak less than necessary. The more you talk, the more likely you are to accidentally say something foolish or reveal a vulnerability. Plus, silence creates this undeniable aura of authority. And third, guard your reputation fiercely. In so many environments, your reputation is your absolute most valuable asset. It precedes you, and honestly, it can win battles for you before you even step foot in the room. Looking at the historical examples throughout Greene's work, we consistently see this specific micro-narrative play out over and over again. It always starts with phase 1, the setup. This is where the strategist identifies a vulnerability in their opponent, or maybe an opening in the market. Then comes phase 2, the strategic move. Notice, this isn't a hasty reaction, it is a highly calculated action, perfectly timed. And finally, phase 3, the outcome. Because that move was based on objective reality and executed with totally concealed intentions, the strategist dramatically alters the outcome in their favor, successfully securing their power. Moving on from the basic rules, we elevate to section 3, thinking like a strategist, controlling the board. Now, what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast between hoping for success and actively engineering it. Naive thinking is essentially just hoping for the best outcome. Launching a new project or having a difficult conversation and just crossing your fingers that it goes well. Strategic thinking, on the other hand, is engineering success through rigorous foresight. A master strategist doesn't just hope. They plan for all eventualities. They ask themselves, okay, if I do X and they respond with Y, what exactly is my countermove? It is a completely proactive way of living your life, rather than just reacting to whatever happens to you. To be the ultimate strategist in your own life, you really have to embody this idea. You must remain unromantic and deeply pragmatic. Now, this doesn't mean you can't enjoy art or love or life, not at all. It just means that when you're evaluating your career, your competitors, or even your own skill level, you absolutely refuse to wear rose-colored glasses. You don't take sides based on pure ideology if it blinds you to the facts, and you never let yourself get bogged down by distractions. You look at what is actually happening in front of you, not what you think ought to happen. All right, we've mastered external maneuvering. So the crucial point now is shifting our focus inward. Section 4, discovering your life's task, the internal shift. So we've figured out how to defend ourselves and maneuver externally, but we have to ask, what is all this actually for? Think back to when you were a kid. There were probably certain subjects, activities, or puzzles that just naturally drew you in, right? Well, that wasn't an accident. This brings us to the concept of the life's task. It's an intense internal calling or inclination that perfectly aligns with your unique innate strengths. This concept is absolutely fundamental because it completely replaces the modern myth of raw talent. It's not about being born a genius, it's about identifying a powerful, personalized mission that is entirely authentic to your own psychology. Because look, without discovering this calling, all your strategic maneuvering is going to lack true direction. Sure, you might become a highly powerful executive, but if it's in a field you secretly despise, your power has no ultimate meaning. You are basically just efficiently climbing the wrong mountain. Mastery, therefore, is not about raw talent. It is about relentless dedication to your true calling. When you pair that strategic detachment we talked about earlier with a calling that you deeply, genuinely love, you become an unstoppable force. Which brings us to our final section, the path to mastery, achieving ultimate fulfillment. This is the actual chronological journey of personal development. Green maps this out flawlessly into 3 distinct phases. First, you must observe deeply. When you enter a new field, your job isn't to impress people right out of the gate. Your job is to stay quiet, observe the power dynamics, and learn the unwritten rules. The second step is relentless skill acquisition. This is where you put in the tedious, totally unglamorous hours of practice to build up your foundational abilities. And finally, step 3, active experimentation. This is the fun part. This is where you step out of your mentor's shadow, maybe break a few rules, and start actively experimenting with what you've learned using your own unique voice. As you move through these phases, you can really see how proficiency compounds over time. You start out as the novice, in the observation phase, basically just a sponge, absorbing everything. Then you grow into the practitioner, actively solidifying those skills. And finally, you reach the highest peak as the master, in the active experimentation phase. Now, this peak isn't just about technical skill. It is the exact point where your external strategy and your internal life's task finally merge together. It's that beautiful moment when you are playing your own game at the highest possible level. Ultimately, when you distill all of Green's massive amount of historical research down, there is really only one true path to personal excellence. Just one. And it absolutely requires integrating these 2 halves. You need the external, pragmatic tactics to navigate the sometimes ruthless reality of human nature, but you also need your deep internal calling to provide your fuel and your direction. You simply cannot have one without the other. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to take a hard, unromantic look at your current trajectory. I'm going to leave you with this stark reality to consider as you step back into your daily life. Are you actively pursuing your true life's task using strategic awareness? Or are you, by default, just playing someone else's game? Think about that for a minute. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the dynamics around you.